There are some really big questions about whether Donald Trump can be held accountable. Oh, I mean, let's just be very clear. There are no questions. Donald Trump is unlikely to be held accountable for his crimes, alleged and otherwise, after winning the presidency because, special counsel Jack Smith just had his request granted to pause Trump's federal election interference case by December 2nd. He will notify the court about how he's going to proceed. But, it's likely the first step in ending the prosecution. And then you have New York. Donald Trump, who was convicted on 34 felony counts in May, he is expected to be sentenced on November 26th, but Judge Juan Merchan, he moved the sentencing until after the election, I think anticipating the fact that Donald Trump could be reelected, and Donald Trump himself has demanded that Judge Merchan throw out the charges because of the Supreme Court's immunity ruling. Judge Merchan, he's going to roll on that demand next week. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but guess what? Andrew Weissman and Mary McCord are, and they're back with us.
So Andrew, let's start with Judge Merchan with this, because this is the most immediate thing facing Trump cases. What do you think the judge does here? How does he move forward on this?
Well, next week he has said that he's going to issue a decision with respect to Donald Trump's motion to set aside the verdict based on the fact of the new Supreme Court case granting the presidency sort of broad immunity. And the issue for Judge Merchan is whether there was sort of, quote, official act evidence, evidence from when Donald Trump was president that was somehow improperly used at this trial, which involved sort of basically the 2016 campaign. And so the judge has to rule on that. I expect that if the judge doesn't sort of put the whole thing off, he is going to deny Donald Trump's motion, which then means that we currently have this November 26th scheduled sentencing date. It's worth noting that even if Judge Merchan wanted to proceed and doesn't agree to just put the case off, that Donald Trump is likely to try to appeal that or seek a mandamus and try to get to the Supreme Court to sort of put off any sentencing. And honestly, for Judge Merchan, the difficult issue is sentencing somebody during a presidential transition. I think the one thing that's clear is even if he went forward, the idea that he would be sentenced to a jail term seems now inconceivable. So this is the wild card as to what will happen. But I think I agree with Simone that the big picture is that even if this were to go forward, there's just no way it would be sort of a meaningful punishment anymore. And this is the one case that I think really has a shot of going forward. I think everything else is basically, for various reasons, a dead letter.
Yeah, we have that from Reuters about ending Trump's Georgia case. The impending return to the White House brings criminal cases to a halt. You did have, Mary, our friend Glenn Kirshner, adding this in Newsweek about Jack Smith's case, quote, Trump's co-conspirators, because that will force Donald Trump, indict Donald Trump's co-conspirators because that will force Donald Trump's hand. If Donald Trump wants to get rid of the cases against his criminal associates, his co-conspirators, the folks who helped him try to steal the 2020 election, if he wants to get rid of those cases after he's sworn in as president, he will have to engage in corruption. What do you think of that idea of indicting the co-conspirators?
Well, all along, I thought that, given that Jack Smith named in, and we're talking now about the January 6th indictment pending in D.C., he had several co-conspirators who were pretty readily identifiable. And, I think that had there been more time originally when this indictment was returned at the first time, not the superseding indictment, you might have seen all of those co-conspirators indicted. I think given the timing was one reason why only the president, the former president, was indicted. But now, as Glenn indicates, I mean, there really is no reason not to go ahead and bring charges and pursue the charges against the co-conspirators, except for the fact that is that a waste of time because Donald Trump will almost certainly order his Department of Justice to dismiss those cases. So I don't know if it's worth the time and effort, although honestly, the time and effort has already been put into the indictment and the superseding indictment that does explain the role of those co-conspirators. So it wouldn't be a whole lot of additional effort to do that. I just don't know that it would go anywhere. And right now, I think the Department of Justice is probably focusing its resources on figuring out what to do to wind down these other cases and moving justice along and keeping with norms and rule of law. And they also might see this as an overly political stunt to do right at the end of the term. That said, there are many other co-conspirators in the Georgia case that you were just referring to. And even though that Georgia case will not be able to go forward against Donald Trump, it's a state case, so it's a different reason, but I don't think it'll be able to go forward against Donald Trump. There's nothing stopping it from going forward against the other co-conspirators. Now, some of them are trying to ride the coattails of the immunity decision and, filing briefs about how they also should get the benefit of immunity based on the former president's official acts evidence not coming in against them. But that's all legal issues to be decided. There's not otherwise sort of a constitutional bar to, or a federalism bar or a supremacy clause bar to those co-conspirators being made to go forward in Georgia.
People might wonder, why can the Georgia case not go forward against Trump?
So, this is a state prosecution, so it's not something where he could order his Department of Justice to dismiss it. And it's something that would be left up to a court in Georgia to decide. But I think the better of the argument probably is the same rationale that the Office of Legal Counsel has, that's at the Department of Justice, has had with respect to why a sitting president cannot be prosecuted while in office. And that is because the presidency, it would so undermine and the constitutional structure that gives so much authority to the presidency, and the presidency, unique of all the executive branch appointments, is responsible for so many things, that the diversion of time and attention to sitting in a trial, the impact on this in the president's role with foreign governments and foreign powers, all of these things combine to make it, at least as a matter of the Department of Justice and federal law, it would, violate constitutional principles to do that. So I think that will be the argument made in state court. And even though that OLC memo doesn't govern the states, I think that argument is probably the argument that will prevail.
That is why you have the 25th Amendment. So there is a solution. It's not so, this is one of the things that's kind of irked me in this whole process. And Andrew just made the point again that just kind of tweaked me a little bit, about, not being able to do certain things during a transition. Criming is criming,
Unless you're Donald Trump.
And that's what we found out. Unless you're Donald Trump, you can crime and not do the time. And now, Andrew, you've got a whole bunch of folks lining up who did the crime and are online to do time and are doing time, looking for their pardons. As the New York Times reported, only hours after the election was called for Donald Trump. Early Wednesday, one convicted writer, Christopher Carnell, asked the federal judge to push back a hearing in his case, saying he expected to receive clemency. Other lawyers for Jan 6 defendants have privately said they're planning similar moves. Now, in this case, the judge overseeing Carnell's case rejected his request without explanation in a very terse order. But here we are. The kingpin criminal is going to pardon all the other little pins in this thing. And what are just everyday citizens to make of all of this? What's our takeaway from what we've seen? The lack of focus and urgency by the Department of Justice from the very beginning of this, the bending over of the judicial system because it involved a former president who I put a big pin in is a private citizen, not the sitting president. So those arguments go away. What do we take away? Should we take away from this as we see Donald Trump give clemency to everyone who was in this building back here, crapping on desks, breaking windows, hurting and maiming, and in cases killing police officers, saying, you know what, y'all free, because y'all patriots. What does it say to the rest of us?
Look, this is really, that election has consequences. Donald Trump, when he was running, embraced the January 6th defendants and didn't in any way sort of distance himself from that. The president, under our Constitution, has unfettered discretion with respect to the pardon power. We've already seen President Trump, when he was president, use and, in my view, abuse that power, and he will be able to do so again. It'll be interesting whether he uses that power in a sort of bludgeon as opposed to a scalpel. And Michael, as you said, uses it to, let's say, pardon defendants who've been convicted of actually attacking and assaulting police officers who are protecting the Capitol, as opposed to the relatively more minor players who simply trespassed. I mean, there obviously is a huge array of people,
right.
And so it'll be interesting to see whether he shows any sort of discretion in doing that. Of course, a lot of the viewers would say none of these people should be afforded a pardon, but this is something that this was an issue for the electorate in many ways. They knew what was going on. That Donald Trump, one thing we can't say about him is it's not like he hid his views here, and it didn't seem to be a stumbling block for people to vote for him. And for people like Mary and me, who sort of grew up in the Department of Justice, I've been a defense lawyer and a prosecutor, it's just so hard to see because it's so antithetical to the rule of law.